Okay, well, welcome back. Here we are, jumping into Matthew 25. So, let's see what else Jesus has to say about the end times, because he's still talking, right? Just because we've gone from Matthew 24 to Matthew 25 doesn't mean anything has changed. It's the same conversation that Jesus has been having with the apostles as they've been on the Mount of Olives. If you remember way back in Matthew 24, verses 3 and 4, we've got this conversation happening about when will these things be, what's the sign of your coming, and when's the end of the age, and Jesus is still answering that question. We're still talking there. So we went from verse 24:51 or 24:50. The Lord of that servant will come in a day when he looks not for him, in an hour that he's not aware of, and will cut him asunder and appoint him his portion with hypocrites. And there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. And he goes right into the next verse. Then shall the kingdom of heaven be likened to 10 virgins. Well, when's then? If you remember the conversation we had about then, way back in the first class, I gave you the example of me driving to Dallas, and then being, depending on how I use the word then, it could be that I made phone calls when I got to Dallas, or it could be that I made phone calls during my trip to Dallas, right? The then can reference a time happening or a time in the future, right? It can even reference something that's in the past. I mean, we have to be careful because then can mean all sorts of things. It says, then shall the kingdom of heaven be likened to 10 virgins. Well, when's then? Well, if we look at, we go back to verse 44, be ready, for in such an hour as you think not, the Son of Man comes. We're talking about the coming of the Son of Man. Talking about when Jesus descends from heaven with 10,000s and 10,000s of his saints and all of the angels, and touches his feet down on the Mount of Olives. Then is what we're talking about. That's the then. Then shall the kingdom of heaven be likened to 10 virgins, which took their lamps and went forth to meet the bridegroom. 5 of them were wise and 5 were foolish. They that were foolish took their lamps and took no oil with them, but the wise took oil in their vessels with their lamps. When the bridegroom tarried, they all slumbered and slept, and at midnight there was a cry made, behold, the bridegroom comes, go out and meet him. So here we have, again, this meet, meaning that you've got people waiting for the dignitary, the bridegroom, to show up, a person of importance. They're going to go meet him and bring him back to the wedding, right? It's just underscoring how closely related the sign of the Son of Man is to the actual coming of Jesus. They're really close together, really close. There's just not a lot of room. There's room for men to respond. There's room for men to go hide in caves and to be fearful and to be scared because they know judgment's coming. There's time for the nations to respond, but there's not much time. At midnight there was a cry made, verse 6, behold, the bridegroom comes, go you out and meet him, apantasize him. And all the virgins arose, they trimmed their lamps, and the foolish ones said to the wise, give us of your oil, for our lamps are gone out. But the wise answered, saying, not so, lest there's not enough for us and for you. Go rather to those that sell and buy for yourselves. And while they went to buy, who's the they? The foolish ones. Because they weren't what? Ready. They weren't ready. While they went to buy, the bridegroom came, and they that were ready went in with him to the marriage, and the door was shut. Who went into the marriage? Those who were ready. Those who were not ready are still out looking for oil someplace. Afterward came also the other virgins, saying, Lord, Lord, open to us. But he answered and said, verily I say to you, or truly I say to you, I don't know you. Watch therefore, for you do not know the day or the hour in which the Son of Man comes. So again, we're told, be ready, watch, because at whatever point it becomes obvious, there will not be time to do anything but respond. You just have to be ready, right? Go back to when the abomination of desolation. There's another example of being ready. You got to have the script. You got to be ready to go, because when you see the abomination of desolation, whether you're in Judea, whether you're on a rooftop, or whether you're out in a field, when you see it, anywhere that you see it, you have to jump into action. You have to know what to do and when to do it. Jesus is saying the same thing here. Now, the interesting part about this one is that they were all virgins. They were all people who were designated to support the bridegroom in his marriage. And there were 10 of them, and they all had the same position, they all had the same authority, they all had the same calling. The only thing that was different between them were that 5 of them were prepared because they thought ahead, and 5 weren't. Across the board, everything else is the same. Back when I took econ, back when I was in college and I took econ, my economics instructor used to say, ceteris paribus. And that is, talking about if everything else is equal, all things equal, ceteris paribus, all things equal, if you change one thing, what happens to this over here? Nothing else changes. You just change supply, what happens to demand? Change demand, what happens to supply? Everything else stays the same, ceteris paribus, right? That's what Jesus is saying. Everything is the same. Everything's the same. Same situation, same position, same trustedness, same level of trust, right? The only thing that was different between the 5 was that 5 had extra oil and 5 didn't. That was the only difference. The reason why I'm hammering that is because Jesus continues to increase his examples. The first example we had was of the good men. He said if the good men of the house had known in what hour the thief would come, he wouldn't have allowed his house to be broken up. Goodman's just being him, right? That's where we start. The goodman's just being the goodman. He's like, I've got this house. I'm going to watch it. And then we move into the good steward has responsibility to feed. And Jesus expands our understanding. He says, okay, the goodman of the house, he just had one task, and that was just to live in the house and take care of it. That was it. Here's this person that's supposed to be giving food to everybody, and this guy now has a choice to make. He's either going to be a good steward or a bad steward. Same guy, 2 different possible outcomes. I'm either going to do what the Lord says or I'm not going to do what the Lord says, right? Now, we move into the 10 virgins. So now we've gone from individuals, right? First time was a person, second time's a person. Now we've got 10 people. And the Lord's saying you've got 5 of them who were prepared and 5 who weren't, right? He's keeps expanding our understanding of what prepared means. So the five that were foolish, the end of this is that they didn't have, that the bridegroom says, I don't even know who you are. So they had been called, they had been appointed, had been given a position, had been trusted, but by the time the wedding came, because they weren't ready, the bridegroom said, I don't know you. Let's keep going. Verse 14. For the kingdom of heaven is as a man traveling to a far country. Now, I want to point out that phrase, the kingdom of heaven, is not in the original language. That was added by people doing the translation work. So this actually says, for as a man traveling to a far country called his servants and delivered to them goods. That's what it actually says. So in other words, we have Jesus is continuing. Jesus wasn't talking about the kingdom of heaven before, so I don't agree with what this says. It's not that the kingdom of heaven, he's talking about his coming. He's talking about his return. It should say, for the return of the Son of Man is as a man traveling. Because that's the topic at hand. It's not the kingdom of heaven, it's Jesus' return. For, as a man traveling to a far country, who called his servants and delivered to them goods, to one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, and to another 1. To every man according to his several ability. Okay, so now we've expanded. We had one guy with a simple task, one guy with a complex task that had decisions to make, 10 people who had decisions to make, all who started with the same criteria, but ended up making different decisions. Some were wise and some were foolish. Now we have 3 people, and in this case, what we see is that the master is looking at all 3 people, and he's saying, I've dealt with you, and I've dealt with you. I know the gifts and the talents that you have. I know the gifts and the talents that you have, and I know the gifts and the talents that you have. And the master here is saying he's looking at 3 people now that are differently endowed. To this point, things have been ceteris paribus. They've been all things equal. But now things are different. Now it's based on the person's abilities and their gifts and their talents, their skills, their interactions. Bless you.
Thank you.
To the one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, and to another 1. Every man he gave according to his several or his different ability. And straightway the master took his journey. Then he that had received 5 talents, or $5, or $5,000, take your pick, went and traded with that money and made another 5. So, guy goes out, invests, and doubles his money. Good job. Likewise, he that had received 2 also gained another 2. So, the first guy, what was the percentage increase of the first guy? 100%. Started with 5, gained 100%. Second guy, what was his percentage increase? $2, 100%, right? And likewise, he that had received 2 also gained another 2. Verse 18, but he that received 1 went and digged in the earth and hid his Lord's money. After a long time, the Lord of those servants comes and reckons with them. And he that received 5 talents came and brought another 5, saying, Lord, you delivered to me 5 talents. Behold, I have gained beside them 5 more. His Lord said to him, well done, good and faithful servant. You've been faithful over a few things. I will make you ruler over many things. Enter into the joy of your Lord. So, the guy put effort into it, doubled the master's money. The master's like, good job. You did that really well. I'm going to give you more to take care of. Verse 22, he also that had received 2 talents came and said, Lord, you delivered to me 2 talents. Behold, I have gained 2 more beside them. 100% increase. His Lord said to him, well done, good and faithful servant. You've been faithful over a few things. I will make you ruler over many things. Enter into the joy of your Lord. Same reward. Same outcome, same reward. Consistent. The Lord is consistent. Then he which received the 1 talent came and said, Lord, I know that you're a hard man, reaping where you have not sown and gathering where you have not strewed or sown. And I was afraid, and I went and hid your talent in the earth. So here, you have what is yours. In other words, I'm giving it back to you. I wanted to make sure I didn't lose it. Here you go. His Lord answered and said to him, verse 26, you wicked and slothful servant, you knew that I reaped where I sowed not, and I gathered where I have not strewn. You should have therefore put the money with the exchangers, and then at my coming I would have at least received my own with usury. Right? At my coming I should have received my own with usury. In other words, you could have found something to do. I gave you that $1,000. You could have, at a minimum, you could have put it in a savings account and made a 1% interest off of it. You could have done something with it. Take therefore the talent from him and give it to the one that has 10 talents. For to everyone that has will be given, and he will have an abundance. But from him that has not will be taken away, even that which he has. And cast the unprofitable servant into outer darkness, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. So here we have again, outer darkness, weeping and gnashing of teeth. So let's just unpack this just a little bit. Remember the topic. The topic is, when will these things be? What's the sign of your coming, and when's the end of the age? And Jesus is answering that question by giving us this parable of the 3 men and the different talents. The one with $5,000, the one with $2,000, and the one with $1,000. The guy with 5,000 doubles his money, the guy with 2,000 doubles his money, and the guy with 1,000 hides it. So, what can we learn about the guy that hid the money? Because the focus is as much about him as it is about the guys that were successful. We know that if we take what the Lord gives us and if we invest it and we do something with it and we double it, that the Lord's going to be like, hey, you did a great job, good and faithful servant, well done. I'm going to give you a whole bunch more because you've proven yourself, right? We've got that part. What about the guy, though, that hid it? What about him? What do we see when we look at him? Because that tells us something. Yes,
Did yours say that? Well, mine says that he was afraid. So
he was afraid. Yeah, the guy was the guy that had the 1 talent was afraid. Yes.
I was reading about how fear is the opposite of faith.
Many people do believe that fear is the opposite of faith, and you'll hear that preached in the Word of Faith circles. And I don't disagree fully, but I do disagree a little bit, because it is possible to have fear and still be in faith. You can be afraid. If the Lord for example, there have been many times where the Lord's given me a word of knowledge for somebody and I've had to go and I've been asked, I shouldn't say I've had to, the Lord's asked me to go and give a word of knowledge to somebody, right? So let me just tell you kind of a story real quick. I was at Aspen Coffee, working at the bar, and watching the baristas. I like watching the baristas work. It's just fun. And I was working there, and there was this tall, really handsome guy that came up, probably 6'4", and my first thought was, I bet Saul looked like that. Because Scripture says that Saul was a head taller than the rest of his peers, and that he was a handsome man. And I thought, I bet Saul, my first thought, tall, handsome dude, I thought that's probably what Saul looked like, you know. And I heard the Lord say to me, Satan has a plan to kill him and you need to warn him. I heard the Lord tell me that plainly. And I'm just working, you know, and kind of ignoring the Lord. Because I'm like, how do you walk up to somebody and say that Satan's got a plan to kill you? You know, that sounds a little bit unbelievable. And so I just worked and kept working, and I had this nudge kind of on me, this like, you know, it's like those times when you know the Lord wants you to do something, but you really don't want to do it, you know? Yeah. And I'm working and I'm trying to ignore the Holy Spirit. And which is horrible to say, but I really think I was. Honestly, I was. And I'm like, will this go away? And honestly, it wasn't like I was trying to ignore the Holy Spirit. It was more like I was trying to discern and see if it was just me or if it was going to go away or if it was really the Lord. Mm-hmm. And I really plainly, it's like the Lord just firmly said to me, are you going to? I'm like, oh, it's the Lord. You know? And so I'm like, okay. I put my laptop lid down and I walked over to him. And I'm like, how do you say this to somebody? How do you even bring this up? And so I walked over to him and I said, hey, how are you? I'm fine. Good. Do you feel like God has a plan for your life? Yes. What's his response? Like, okay. Do you feel like God has a specific plan for your life? Yes. And I'm sitting here thinking, Buck, you're really screwing this up, man. Why don't you just say it? And I'm like, okay, here I go, diving full force. And I just jumped in the water, right? Cannonball. Like, hey, you know what? When you walked up, I very clearly heard God tell me that Satan has a plan to kill you. He's already got it in place. And I'm supposed to warn you and let you know that it's a very real thing. You need to surround yourself with men of faith that can hold you accountable, that can watch with you and can walk with you. And you need to make certain that you're submitting yourself with them in whatever you're going to do in your life. And just realize that even though you should not walk in fear, there is already a plan that's in place to take you out. And he just looks at me and is quiet. And he leans back in his chair and he said, there's no way you would have any idea why I'm here. He said, I go to Henderson Hills and I believe the Lord has called me to be a missionary. I'm working right now, meeting the pastor, the young adults pastor, and I are meeting here in about 5 minutes to talk through what I need to do to get ready to go to be a missionary. And he told me the countries that he thought he would end up in, you know. And I told him, I said, well, just know that before you ever touch ground over there, the enemy's already planning against you. He knows you're coming, and he's already planning against you. And it doesn't mean you need to be fearful. It just means that you need to be aware, you know. And I walked off and have never seen him again. I couldn't tell you his name. I don't know who he is. He doesn't know who I am, right? That was a very fearful experience. For me, it was very fear. But faith was all the way through it. Mm-hmm. I had to continue stepping in. So I don't think, all that said, I don't think that fear is the opposite of faith. I think that faith ends up being even more valuable in the face of fear, right? And fear is an emotion, can be a spirit, right? God has not given us a spirit of fear, right? It can be a spirit. God's not given us a spirit of fear, but of power, of love, and of a sound mind. So it definitely is an attack. It's definitely a battle, but I don't think it's the opposite of faith, right? But doesn't mean it can't be. I just don't think it has to be.
Just the way that I was reading on it was like because this guy was sharing his testimony,
Uh-huh.
and that's what he had said. It's like if you're believing, you're letting the fear consume you. You're believing in the fear.
Yeah,
It's
right.
what
Yeah,
he
that
went
makes
about
that
it.
makes total sense. Yeah, if
But-
you live in fear, then it would be the canceling of faith, right?
Yeah.
If we allow ourselves to live in it, 100%
And
right.
That's just,
Yeah.
But that's what that reminded me.
Oh, that he's living in it. The guy in the parable here is living in fear, and so it canceled his walk of faith.
Yeah.
I see what you're saying. Yeah, sure. I could totally see that. Yeah, because he is fearful, right?
Yeah.
He said, I feared you because I know that you're an austere man. In other words, you're hard to work for. Austere, right? The interesting part here is that the first two guys seem to know the personality and the character of the master. They saw the same things, evidently, that this guy saw, the third guy, but it was how they responded to it, right? They took a chance. Like rather than living in fear and allowing it to cripple them, which is what it sounds like he did, right? They allowed that to turn into respect and to a drive to end up meeting the master's expectations, right? The first two guys had this sense of knowing the master's, I'll say his heart, right? They knew, it seems from the parable that they knew that if they did it well, the master would recognize that. But this guy did not know his master, the third guy. Because if he'd have known his master the way his master really was, he would have recognized what the other two guys did, which was, if I just do something with what I've got to do something. And the master even says it. If you look here, he says, in verse 27, he says, you should have therefore given my money to the exchangers, and then at my coming I should have received my own with usury, with interest. He's like, you could have at least put it in a savings account. That is one of the least risky items that you could have possibly done. If you were afraid of risk, you could have done something that was very low risk. I would have still at least recognized the fact that you made a decision that was sound, but you didn't even make a sound decision, right? You chose to bury what you had been given. You chose to bury it because you thought that if you gave me back what was mine, that would be adequate, and it's not. You just don't know me. And so you're gone. And so this guy now will be sitting out here in outer darkness, right? It says, cast the unprofitable servant into outer darkness, where there'll be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Because, verse 30, because he was unprofitable, because he did not make a profit for the master, he ends up now sitting in darkness, wishing that he could have done it all over again, without the ability to do it. No chance. It's done. Lost his opportunity. Jesus gives us this parable in response to when will these things be? When's the sign of your coming? When's the end of the age? Jesus does not seem to be concerned about answering those three questions the way the disciples thought they should be answered, right? Jesus' focus so far has been, be prepared, be prepared, be prepared, be prepared, be prepared. Be ready, be ready, be ready, be ready, be ready. Work, 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 work. Right? Let's go to the next one. Verse 31. When the Son of Man will come in his glory, now catch this, when he will come. This is the coming of the Son, not the sign. When the Son of Man will come in his glory and all the holy angels, now that word angels can also mean any entourage. It can be attendants, right? All his holy angels, his sent ones with him. Then shall he sit upon the throne of his glory, and before him will be gathered all the nations. Now, catch this. When the Son of Man comes, he will sit on his throne, and the nations are gathered in front of him. Earlier in Matthew 24, when we had the sign of the Son, he came on a cloud, and only the elect were gathered to him. This says, when he comes, he'll sit on his throne, and every nation of the earth will be gathered to him. This is a different experience. Before him will be gathered all nations, and he will separate them one from another as a shepherd divides sheep from goats. He'll set sheep on his right hand, but the goats on his left. Then shall the king say to them on his right hand, Come, you blessed of my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me meat. I was thirsty, and you gave me drink. I was a stranger, and you took me in. Naked, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you visited me. Verse 36. I was in prison, and you came to me. Then shall the righteous answer him, saying, Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you to drink? When did we see you as a stranger and take you in, or naked and clothe you? Or when did we see you sick or in prison and come to you? And the king will answer and say to them, Verily I say to you, inasmuch as you have done it to one of the least of these my brethren, you've done it to me. Now we don't think about this, but Jesus is saying, I am in every person you interact with. When you do it for one of these, you're doing it for me. When you help somebody on the street, when you invite somebody in, if you got somebody that's in town from YWAM and they need a place to stay, right? There are times where I haven't felt like we've seen somebody, I felt like we need to give this person a place to stay. And I didn't feel comfortable inviting them into my house. So I went and got them a hotel instead, right? We've had people stay with us. The most notable one was this guy that was cohabitating with a witch and was a drug user, and I ended up witnessing to him at some point. I don't remember where I was at. Ended up talking to him about the Lord, and he shared his life with me, and I'm like, when you're ready to get out of all that stuff, call me and tell me, and I'll help you get out of it. But you got to make the decision. You got to make the decision to leave the witch. You got to quit having sex, and you got to quit using drugs. And when you're ready to do that, you call me, and I'll help you get out. Well, one night about 10:15, he called. He said, she's gone, and this is my chance to leave. Can you come and pick me up? So Mary didn't know I was doing this. And I'm like, hey,
Like I married the wildest person.
there's this guy that needs Jesus, So I call my brother-in-law, and I'm like, hey, I need to go get this guy that's living with a witch. Will you go with me and help him get his stuff out of her house? And he said, sure. So he jumps in the car with me, and Craig and I go over, and we get this guy out. We go up there, and we grab his stuff, and he comes and he lives in our basement for a week and a half, something like that. And so, and you know what? His life turned around. He made a commitment to the Lord. And 2-3 years later, I ran into him. He was doing great, right? But there's an example of kind of an odd circumstance where we took somebody in for a short period of time. They didn't live with us for a long time. He didn't, but it was just enough time for him to be able to get his feet on the ground and to be able to, get resituated and change life, right? Doing that for him was like we did it for Jesus. That's what Jesus is saying, right? It's like, but it takes faith because there is fear involved. I mean, you've got somebody that's a drug user that's living with a witch. What are you bringing into your house, right? Yeah. You have to choose faith over fear, right? But Jesus is saying we have to choose faith over fear, right? If we don't, we're going to be like the guy that buried his stuff in the ground, and we're going to have a house and not be able to use it, and it's just going to be a place where we live, right? They said to him, verse 40, I say to you, inasmuch as you have done it to one of the least of these my brethren, you've done it to me. Verse 41, then shall he say also to them on his left hand, Depart from me, you cursed, into everlasting fire, prepared for the devil and his angels. Now notice that the fire is not prepared for the ungodly. It wasn't, but there's no place left. Right? There is no place. We align ourselves with the kingdom in this world. We either align ourselves with the kingdom of God or we align ourselves with the kingdom of Satan. There are no two kingdoms. That's the only two kingdoms that there are. There's not a third kingdom. We are either on the side of God in light or we are on the side of Satan in darkness. There is the kingdom of light and the kingdom of darkness, period. That's it. The kingdom of light is straight and narrow. It's through Jesus and that's it. The kingdom of everything else is over here. That's why the world has such a hard time with it. Don't tell me I have to believe in Jesus. You believe whatever you want to believe. I'm going to believe what I want to believe, and we're all going to be fine. No, that's not what Jesus said. Jesus said, I'm the way, the truth, and the life, and no one comes to the Father but by me. And the reason why he came down as a man was to make certain that we heard firsthand, here's how you get to the Father. The kingdom of light, the kingdom of darkness. Jesus is saying to those that are in the kingdom of darkness, your reward, your eternal resting, it won't even be rest, your eternal place, your repose, will be with the devil and his angels. You're choosing to align yourself with the devil and his angels in life. You will end up living with the devil and his angels in death. That's what Jesus is saying here. Then he'll say to them on his left hand, depart from me, you cursed, into everlasting fire, prepared for the devil and his angels. For I was hungry, and you gave me no meat. I was thirsty, and you gave me no drink. I was a stranger, and you did not take me in. Naked, and you did not clothe me. Sick and in prison, and you did not visit me. Then shall they also answer him, saying. So the first group answered him and saying, Lord, when did we see you hungry or thirsty or naked, and we took care of you? And Jesus said, inasmuch as you did it to the least of these, you did it to me. Now Jesus is answering the opposite side. Then shall they answer him, saying, Lord, when did we see you hungry or thirsty or a stranger or naked or sick or in prison and did not minister to you? So the first group was like this, Lord, when did I see you hungry or thirsty or naked? Or when did I ever invite you in? I'd have remembered that. When did I do that? I don't remember doing that. And Jesus is like, inasmuch as you did it to these, you did it to the least, you did it to me. Now here's the other group. They're like this. When did I ever see you? Don't tell me I didn't do that to you. You never came in front of me. Don't accuse me, Jesus. Right? Two different attitudes here. The first one are in wonder. They're like, when did I ever do that? I would have remembered, Lord. I know I would have. And these guys are like, don't tell me you were there. I remember. I never once saw your face. You can't tell me I didn't do that to you. Get the tone? Then shall they answer him, saying, Lord, when did we see you hungry or thirsty or a stranger or naked or sick or in prison and didn't minister to you? Then he'll answer them and saying, verily I say to you, inasmuch as you did it not to the one of least of these, you did not do it to me. And these shall go away into everlasting punishment, but the righteous into life eternal. So those who didn't care for their fellow man, who weren't the hands and feet of Jesus, who weren't the heart of God to humanity, are the ones who went into judgment. It's okay. It's just a garage floor. I'll clean it later on. It's not a big deal. Don't worry about it. Mary, don't worry about it. It's all good. We'll stay on track here. We're good. So we have this situation. You might want to get her some more coffee, though, because she probably wants some. We have this situation where we've got people, right? We have people who are either naturally, and this is what Scripture is saying without saying it. Let's go back to what is it being said. The first group of people are like, Lord, when did we ever see you this way? When did we ever feed you? I would have remembered feeding you. I don't remember feeding you. When did I ever feed you? Right? They're amazed at the fact that they even did it. And what that's saying to us is that it was natural. It was just part of their life. Right? Luke 17, I think it's Luke 17, says the disciples say, Lord, teach us faith. Let me see if I've got it right. Let's go take a look at it real fast. Luke 17, starting with verse 5. The apostle said to the Lord, increase our faith. And the Lord said, if you had faith as the grain of mustard seed, you might say to the sycamore tree, be plucked up by the root, be planted in the sea, and it would obey you. But which of you, having a servant plowing or feeding cattle, will say to him by and by when he's come in from the field, go sit down and eat? In other words, he's like, listen to me. Think about this for a minute, guys. If you have a servant and they're out doing their job, doing what they're supposed to be doing, working hard, sweating, and you're paying them to go plow your field and to tend your cattle, when they come into your house, are you going to tell your servant to go sit down so that you can serve them because they've had a hard day's work? No. You're not. It's one of my favorite scriptures. But which of you, having a servant plowing or feeding cattle, will say to him by and by, when he's come in from the field, Go, sit down to eat? And would you not rather say to him, Make ready wherewith I might sup, gird yourself and serve me, until I have eaten and drunken, and afterwards you can eat and drink? So if your servant's out working all day and they come in, aren't you going to tell your servant, Hey, we need to get dinner ready. Go get it finished. Get me fed. When I'm done eating, you can go eat. You can have the rest of the day off. That's what a servant does. That's what they get paid to do. That's what their expectation is. It's not that the master is responsible for feeding the servant because he did his job. It's that the servant's job is not yet done. That's just part of it. Plowing in the field, feeding the cattle, doing the yard work is part of the duty that the servant has. The servant also needs to come in, make the meal, feed the staff, feed the master, clean up the kitchen, and then the servant's done for the day. And that's what Jesus is saying here. Will he not rather, verse 8, say to him, Luke 17, verse 8, will he not rather say to him, Make ready wherewith I might sup, and gird yourself and serve me till I've eaten and drunken, and afterwards you'll eat and drink? Does he thank the servant because he did the things that were commanded him? I think not. The old King James says, I trow not. I like that. So likewise you, when you shall have done all the things which are commanded you, say, We are unprofitable servants. We've only done that which is our duty to do. A real servant does the work and doesn't think anything about it. You're doing what you're supposed to do. A real servant goes out, plows the field, feeds the cattle, comes in, cooks dinner, feeds his master, eats himself, gets to eat, him or herself gets to eat, right? He or she. And then their job is done. And they don't think anything about it because that's what they're supposed to do. And Luke 17 tells us, Even so, you, when you shall have done all that you're supposed to do, you will say, I'm an unprofitable servant. I've only done what's my duty. I haven't done anything special. I just did what I was supposed to. That's faith. The disciples said, Jesus, increase our faith. And Jesus' response was, serve well and don't think highly of yourself. Do what you're supposed to do. That will increase your faith. Do what you're supposed to do. Just do it. By the time we get here to Matthew 25, we see the same thing. The people who did what they were supposed to do did it natively, naturally, as a byproduct of who they are. They didn't think of it being Jesus because they were surprised when Jesus said, Inasmuch as you've done it to the least of these, you've done it to me. They didn't even think about it. It was just an outflow of who they were. But the people on the other side that were the goats that were getting ready to be cast into outer darkness, or cast into the lake of fire, rather, they were defensive and saying, prove to me that I didn't. You say I didn't do this for you, prove it. Right? That's not a servant, and that's not natural. So what we have here then, by the time we look at this whole thing, we'll close with this. By the time we look at everything that Jesus says in Matthew 24 and Matthew 25, Jesus starts with this, Matthew 24. The whole temple complex is going to be destroyed. Everything's going to, not one stone left upon another. The disciples say, when will these things be? What's the sign of your coming, and when's the end of the age? Jesus does ultimately give the sign of his coming. He talks about it in Matthew 24. When the sign of the Son of Man appears in the heavens, the angels will be sent out. You'll be gathered with a loud trumpet. This is the voice of the archangel. The angels will gather you from the four winds of heaven. Jesus answers that. Jesus does answer, when will the end of the world be? Because he says, when the Son of Man comes and all his entourage, his holy angels, the saints along with him, then will he sit on his throne and judge the nations, and the entire world will be judged, and that will be the end of the age. So Jesus answers the questions, but all the way through what's Jesus saying, the point is always the same. You're my concern. It's not when these things will happen, it's how will you be when these things happen. Jesus is saying, are you going to be ready? Are you going to be prepared? Will you be ready? Are you going to be prepared? Are you watching? Will you be watching? Are you going to be working as a servant? Are you going to be thinking highly of yourself? Or are you going to be doing your job? Are you going to do your job? Are you going to do your job? Are you going to do your job? When I come back, will I find you working? When I come back, will I see interest? Will I see gain? Will I see that you've trusted? Will I see that you've taken chances? Will I see that you've risked? What am I going to see? Are you just going to bury stuff in the sand and think you're just going to give it to me? Or are you going to know me well enough to know that I expect you to do something with it, and you're going to do something, and you're going to make me proud? What am I going to find when I come back? That was Jesus' response to, when will these things be? What's the sign of your coming? When's the end of the age? Jesus' concern was for us. It's not the signs that he was concerned about. It's where we're going to be found when it happens. And so Jesus comes back with, are you ready? 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 Over and over and over again. Are you ready? Will you be ready? Right? So when we walk out of Matthew 24 and Matthew 25, so now so far what we've covered, we've gone through Matthew 24, we jumped over to Daniel, we've come back to Matthew 25. So far what we're seeing is Jesus is concerned about us. These things will happen, and there will be great tribulation, and we will go through it. The church will end up experiencing it because the sign of his coming doesn't happen until after the tribulation in those days. The sign of his coming is associated to the appearing of the Son of Man, who comes back with all the saints with him. That happens at the end of the age. And we'll be there. One way or the other. We'll either be dead and resurrected, or we'll be alive and resurrected, but we'll be with him one way or the other. And are we going to be ready? Right? When that day comes, will we be like those who are carried away to judgment, or will we be like those who are carried away like Noah was and be kept safe from judgment, right? Will we be the good men of the house, watching so that our house doesn't get broken into? Will we be one of the 5 wise virgins who brought extra oil so that no matter how long the Lord takes, we don't get caught off guard and we've got enough oil to keep going? Will we be one of the 2 smart guys that invested, gave the Lord back what he gave us plus so that he can be proud of us? Are we going to do these things instinctively and naturally because of who he is in us and who we are? And we're going to end up standing in front of him saying, Lord, I really don't remember ever seeing you, because I'd have remembered that. And he's like, no, you just did what you were supposed to do. And as much as you did it for them, you did it for me. Good job. Right? That's what he's saying. Be prepared. Be prepared. Be prepared. Be prepared. Be prepared. That's Matthew 24, Matthew 25. So, when we come back next week, we won't be in Matthew anymore. We'll be out. And we'll either be talking about the day of the Lord itself, or we'll be starting the book of the Revelation. I don't know which one yet. We'll see. Anybody have questions or thoughts? Nope. Anything? Nobody? All right. It's a wrap. Thanks for coming.